All right, so buckle up because this deep dive is going to be a wild one. We're talking about Bitcoin, and get this, a prediction that it could hit $400,000.
$400,000 for Bitcoin.
Mm.
Yeah, I can see why that would turn heads.
It sounds insane, right? Like straight out of some sci-fi movie.
Well, what's got people talking is, who's making this prediction? We're not talking about some random internet personality. This is coming from Jack Mallers.
Oh, I know Jack Mullers. He's the CEO of Zap, right?
Yeah, it's the one. And he's not just some Johnny-come-lately to Bitcoin either.
Yeah, he's been around since the early days, right?
Since the Wild West days of Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Remember the Mt. Gox hack back in, what was it, 2013?
Vaguely, but it was a big deal, right?
Huge. It nearly tanked Bitcoin back then. And Mallers, he was there through it all.
Okay, so we're not dismissing this prediction just because it sounds crazy. We're actually going to unpack it, right?
Absolutely. We're going deep on this one. Because Mallers, he's connecting some major dots here. He's talking about the Federal Reserve, the bond market, and how they all tie into Bitcoin's future.
See, this is where I usually check out. It's like the Fed bond market, too much financial jargon. But we need to break this down, right? For regular people who don't speak Wall Street.
You got it. We got to make this stuff relatable.
Okay.
Because believe it or not, this stuff impacts all of us.
Okay, so let's start simple. What's the deal with the Fed right now? What's their big dilemma?
Well, think about the economic roller coaster we've been on, crazy inflation.
Yeah.
Right? And then what did the Fed do?
They started raising interest rates like crazy.
Exactly. Trying to slam the brakes on inflation. But then in 2023, what happened?
They hit pause.
Pause button right there. And that's the dilemma. Because on the one hand, raise rates too high, you risk tanking the whole economy.
Right, but on the other hand, if you hit pause, doesn't that just let inflation linger around longer?
That's the million-dollar question, and that's where Mahler's argument gets interesting. He's saying the market might force the Fed's hand on those interest rates, even if they want to keep things on pause.
Hold on, the market forcing the Fed's hand. That sounds kind of scary. How does that even work?
Okay, so it all comes down to bond yields. Think of it like this. When you buy a bond, you're basically lending money to the government, right?
Okay, I guess so.
The yield is the return you get on that loan. Now, when those bond yields start going up, it means investors are demanding a higher return.
They're not happy with the return they're getting.
Not happy at all. Because they're worried about risk, right? In this case, they're worried about inflation eating away at their returns.
So it's like a big warning sign, right? People are nervous about the economy.
Exactly. And Mahler's, he calls this the market punishing the Fed's inaction. It's like the market is saying, hey, Fed, we don't care if you're taking a break. We're still worried about inflation and what it's doing to the value of the dollar.
This is where my eyes usually glaze over, to be honest. It feels like this big, complex financial system that's totally out of our control. So how does Bitcoin even fit into all of this?
Because when people start getting nervous about the economy, like when they see those bond yields going up and they start to lose faith in the traditional system, they start looking for safer places to put their money, places that are more stable, more predictable. That's where this whole idea of a safe haven asset comes in.
So are you saying Bitcoin is like the financial equivalent of hiding under the covers during a thunderstorm?
In a way, yeah. Because Bitcoin has this unique set of qualities, right?
Yeah.
It's not controlled by any government or central bank. And its supply, that's finite, there will only ever be 21 million Bitcoins.
So no matter what happens with inflation, no matter what crazy policies governments come up with, that supply, it stays the same.
Exactly. And that's appealing to some investors because they see it as a hedge, right? Like a life raft for their money, when everything else feels shaky.
Okay, I think I'm starting to see the connection here. But isn't this where we get to the whole Bitcoin is digital gold argument?
You got it. It's been the go-to comparison for a while now. But Mahler's, he takes it a step further.
Wait, further than Bitcoin becoming the new safe haven? How much further can you go?
He's not just saying Bitcoin is like gold. He's arguing it's actually positioned to replace gold as the go-to alternative asset for like the 21st century.
Wow, that's a bold statement. It's like saying the internet is going to replace, well, everything. So what makes Maulers think Bitcoin has what it takes to dethrone gold? I mean, gold has been the standard for what, centuries?
I think a good question.
Right? Like what makes Bitcoin the gold killer?
Well, Mahler's lays out a few key advantages Bitcoin has over gold, especially in our digital world. He starts with scarcity, which we already touched on. Just like gold, there's a limited amount of Bitcoin out there.
Right, less supply, potentially more value. But we know how much gold is out there, right? And we can always mine for more, even if it gets harder.
Isn't it the same with Bitcoin? That's where a lot of people get tripped up. Yeah, you're my new Bitcoin, but the total supply, that's capped. It's written into the code, 21 million. That's it. You can't change it. So even though we haven't mined it all yet, we know exactly when that last Bitcoin is going to be mined. Not like gold, where it's always kind of a guessing game.
Okay, so scarcity check. What else makes Mahlers so gung-ho about Bitcoin?
Think about actually using gold to buy something,
Hmm.
like even something small. You're not going to chip off a piece of a gold bar to buy a cup of coffee, are you?
Not unless it's really good coffee.
Exactly. That's where divisibility comes in. You can break Bitcoin down into super tiny pieces, like 8 decimal places. These little fractions are called satoshis. Way more practical for everyday transactions than gold could ever be.
No more lugging around sacks of gold coins. Sign me up.
Right. And good luck trying to send those gold coins across the world. It'd take forever, cost a fortune, and who knows if it'd even get there safely. With Bitcoin, boom, a few clicks, and it's across the world instantly. No armored trucks, no piles of paperwork, just pure digital magic.
Okay, I'm sold on the convenience factor for sure.
Yeah.
But what about security? We hear all these stories about crypto hacks and scams. That's got to be a concern, right?
That's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's trustless. It runs on this decentralized network, all secured by super strong cryptography.
Yeah.
Basically, you don't have to trust some bank, some government, or some random company to verify transactions. It just works.
So no shady middlemen.
Nope. And here's where Mahlers makes a really cool connection to the history of gold. It wasn't always just this shiny metal, right? It was money. But it needed governments and banks to back it up, to make it into coins, to stop people from making fakes. That worked for a while. But as the world got more global, more interconnected, that old centralized system, it started to show its cracks.
So gold had its time, but it's kind of stuck in the past.
Kind of, yeah. And that's what's so exciting about what Mahlers is saying. He's not just comparing features. He's saying Bitcoin is built for how we live now in the digital age. It's global, it's instant, it's efficient. And because it's decentralized, it cuts out all those middlemen we've been stuck with for centuries.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around, but kind of awesome at the same time.
Yeah.
This is all pretty theoretical, right? How does Mahler's own experience with Bitcoin play into all of this?
This is where you separate the Bitcoin tourists from the true believers. Mahlers, he's not just talking the talk, he's been living it for years.
Oh, I like it. So spill the tea. What's the insider story on Mahlers and Bitcoin?
He said that he was telling his friends to buy Bitcoin back when it was like $200. Remember, this is way back, before Bitcoin was even on most people's radar.
Back when you said Bitcoin, people thought you were talking about some kind of futuristic cryptocurrency.
Exactly. But Mahlers, he saw something special, even back then. And for those who took his advice, let's just say they weren't just looking for a quick buck. They were early adopters of something Mahlers truly believed could change the game.
It's easy to write someone off as just getting lucky, right? But when you see that kind of conviction, that willingness to put your money where your mouth is, you kind of have to pay attention.
No doubt. And it leads to something else Mahlers talks about, education. He really believes that if more people understood Bitcoin, how it works, what it could do, it could lead to a better financial future for everyone.
So it's not enough for him to be right. He wants to bring people along for the ride. Wants everyone to understand why he's so passionate about Bitcoin, even if they don't agree with everything he's saying.
Totally. It goes back to that idea of Bitcoin being more than just an investment. It's a whole new way of thinking about money, interacting with money.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. The Fed's in a tough spot. The bond market is sending warning signals. Bitcoin's got some serious advantages. And Jack Mallers is putting his money where his mouth is all. As we start wrapping up, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? Why should they care about all of this?
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the weeds a bit with all the technical stuff. But you're right, it's about something much bigger, right? Like this potential for change, maybe even like a total shakeup of the whole system. And that affects everyone, right?
100%.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this $400,000 Bitcoin prediction so fascinating. It's not even really about the price itself at the end of the day. It's more like a signal, a sign that things are shifting in a big way.
So let's say Mueller's is right. Bond yields keep climbing because nobody trusts the Fed to actually fix inflation. Then what? Does everybody just suddenly switch over to Bitcoin? Oh, it's definitely not that simple. I mean, let's not forget, Bitcoin is still relatively new to the game, right? But I think what Mahlers is getting at is that we might be in the very beginning stages of a massive paradigm shift.
Paradigm shift. Now, that's a term you don't hear every day. What would that even look like for everyday people? Like, how would things change?
Think about it.
Mhm.
How much do we all rely on those big financial institutions? The banks, the governments, even credit card companies. They're the ones holding the reins, right? Controlling our money, deciding what it's worth, making all the rules. What Mahlers is suggesting is a future where all that power, it starts to shift away from those big players. Decentralized systems like Bitcoin, those become the new power players.
So instead of relying on these big institutions, we'd have more control ourselves. Kind of scary, but also kind of cool when you think about it.
It's both. And honestly, that's what makes this whole conversation so important. Even if you're not running out to buy Bitcoin this instant, you've got to understand what's happening. These trends, the way the whole financial landscape is shifting beneath our feet, that's crucial stuff to be aware of.
So basically, we can't predict the future, obviously, but if we can at least understand the forces at play, we can kind of prepare for whatever's coming next.
Exactly. And that's what I appreciate about Mahler's take on it. He's not just saying, hey, invest in Bitcoin, you'll get rich. He's challenging us to think differently, to be curious about these new possibilities, and to get involved in shaping what finance looks like in the future.
That's a great point to end on. I think this deep dive has given us a lot to ponder. And for our listeners out there, whether you're all in on Bitcoin or just trying to wrap your head around it all, remember, knowledge is power. The more you understand what's going on, the better prepared you'll be for whatever the future holds. And on that note, we'll catch you on the next deep dive.